Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Shout out to all the homies here. Oh, it didn't direct you, Flash? Interesting. Shout out to Twiz. Shout out to Scott. Shout out to Heather. Flash is here reading his transcripts. Classic Flash. For any of you guys who are wanting ice cream, did you get your ice cream? And also, Heather, let us know how the cookies are doing. We're going to start here by hearing the very end of Creighton's closing, because this is masterful. It's an absolute fucking masterpiece. And the whole thing we watched last time, but this is just worth seeing the end again. It is so fucking good. This is on normal speed, and the timing and the pacing is exquisite. Everything about this is so impactful and powerful, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Whether you've seen it before or you're seeing it again, it is spectacular. And then we will go into day 26. So they had closing arguments for 2 full days in this trial.
And I was thinking, that
I'm gonna have to back it up because I feel like I'm ruining it already because his timing is so good here, and I'm trying to get the subtitles in place. Okay.
And I was thinking, that people who get the last word in this courtroom are y'all.
Cool.
And a lot of witnesses have testified over the last 6 weeks, but there's a couple that never get to testify but are important, and that's common sense.
Yeah, you do.
And human nature. And there's 2 more that don't get to testify. We couldn't bring you any eyewitnesses because they were murdered. But common sense and human nature can speak on behalf of Maggie and Paul.
Yes.
When you look at this in its totality, common sense and human nature can speak for them. And they deserve a voice. Everything he did was meant to try to frustrate the forensics as a lawyer and a prosecutor with the 2 guns and the manufactured alibi, and not taking his phone down to the scene, deleting call logs, making short phone calls, bringing up the boat case, moving Maggie's phone, changing clothes, looking at Paul's phone, calling Rogan, or trying to call Rogan. One man controlled this crime scene initially, and that was Alec. But there were some things he couldn't control. And we brought those to you.
Wow. Powerful.
A couple things that the defendant said that I agree with. He said, whoever did this had anger in his heart. Whoever did this planned it for a long time. That he hurt the ones who were closest to him.
Set that on the stand.
It may be hard to fathom, ladies and gentlemen, but when you put all these circumstances together and really understand who he was in the entirety of his life.
Yes.
And the pressures that he was facing from what he had been doing for so long. You can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
There was one mistake, though.
The reason he won't admit it is because then what would he do with his time? He spent his entire life well, for the vast majority of these years, right? Like a Moriarty, I think of him, like leaving this master plan and just like outsmarting everybody, if you will, and like literally like 4D chess matching with himself, essentially, right? If he doesn't keep that up, then what's he going to be doing? He'll be left. What'll he be left with? The walls of the cell. I mean, literally, he's in prison, and people that are there in prison with him have not testified, but they've commented on this. Like he's like literally like he's limited up. He's just literally doing exactly what he did on the outside, but he's doing it on the inside, and he's just doing the same things. He's still doing. I mean, it's all just part of his whatever you want to call it. I don't even know. I think it's the only thing he can do to keep his mind occupied, maybe to a certain extent. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that. I think it's just like all he knows. You know, I'll quote him from the stand. "Oh, what a tangled web we weave," he says. And that you tell the first lie, and then you're basically, you know, married to it. From a legal standpoint, right? His case is still making its way through all the appeal system, appellate levels, and for that reason, right? You know, you don't want to confess to something, but I don't think that would make a difference. He wouldn't do it anyway. He'll never say what happened. He'll never tell the truth.
There was one mistake, though, he didn't expect. And this is why he was worried about Paul's phone. This is why he's trying to get in touch with Rogan. And it was that kennel video that came up late in the investigation.
Boys.
One of the things I asked him, and we've talked about this, the last question I had to him, and the first question I had to him was, what is the most important part of your testimony here today? And he wouldn't even concede that, but he at least conceded that the most important thing was to look you in the eye and try to explain to you why, after his entire history, you should believe him when he says, "Okay, I was down at the kennels for one brief minute, but I had nothing to do with this." And we went through that long cross in which he identified all these factors, from his partner saying you need to have an attorney present, to his distrust of SLED, to Dave Owen asking him about his relationship, and asked him, "At what point did you decide to lie?" And he finally agreed, okay, it was in this interview. It was that moment in the June 8th interview. It was during that interview.
Oh, you were fishing for bass, James?
But in his 911 call, ladies and gentlemen, at 10:06, when he was asked when he last saw them, he said an hour and a half, and then changed it to approximately 2 hours. Consistent with what he would later say. Before any of those factors that he sat there and ran through with y'all as the reason for his decision even ever existed. And if that's not enough, ladies and gentlemen, you saw, and I played it for him, Daniel Green's body cam, where he was asked the same question. And he said that it was 1.5 hours plus 45 minutes. And all those factors that he identified to you as to why he supposedly lied, he was lying to you, ladies and gentlemen, when he made those up. He was lying to you when he made those up. Just like he's lied to everyone close to him. And he's good at it. He's good at it. that up.
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but okay. I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that. Okay. I rode around with Paul.
Maybe Heather knows me. That's Creighton.
Motive. The means. The opportunity. And ample evidence of guilty conduct and guilty conscience. All four factors are present. And Maggie and Paul deserve a voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel it.
They need a voice because they can no longer speak.
Goosebumps every time.
And this has been a tough job. But the system depends on people who take that oath as jurors and are willing to honor that oath and make that tough decision to vindicate these victims, to vindicate Maggie and Paul, who were cut down in the prime of their lives.
Well, I don't want to disrupt things. Whew.
This is a sealed exhibit. This is what he did.
Mm.
This is what he did right here.
He's not fake crying anymore,
This defendant,
right?
on the other hand, has fooled everyone.
Here we go.
Everyone.
Here we go.
Everyone who thought they were close to him. Everyone who thought they knew he was who he was. He's
Yes.
fooled them all.
Yes.
And he fooled Maggie and Paul too. And they paid for it
Wow.
with their lives. Don't let him fool you too.
Yes. Hmm.
On behalf of the state of South Carolina, I ask you to return a verdict of guilty against the defendant, Richard Alexander Murdaugh, for the murder of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul,
Wow.
and for his possession of firearms during the commission of those malicious offenses. Thank y'all for your attention during this long trial.
His entire closing argument is exquisite, and I've watched this so many times, and it's just goosebumps. Like, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. So now we're going to watch the defense. And for opening statements, it was Dick Harpootlian. And for closing arguments, it's Jim Griffin, which, this is tough because, Jim Griffin is one of Alex's close friends and is, I think everyone would probably agree, way too close to this case, shouldn't have been trying it in the first place. but maybe they realized the jury probably didn't like Poot all that much. Don't blame them. So let's see if they're ready to start.
Sure, thank you. And good morning one more time.
Yep. We're on the next day.
Day number 28. Welcome back. Juror number 254. You are now part of the.
Okay, so I'm gonna skip forward past this because we're not doing gavel to gavel right now. We're just doing closing. Okay, they had some juror stuff, whole other thing. All right. Here we go.
Good morning.
There might be a little door. I mean, there is a little door. What are you talking about, Heather? There's doors. A little door. Oh, do you mean in the back there with the gatey thing or whatever? Oh, that's really funny. I think that's what you mean. That's funny.
Wow. We're at the stage of the case that's called closing arguments. I don't know why they call it argument. I'm not here to have an
Yeah,
argument.
you do. Yeah, you do.
What I'm here to do today, this morning, is to review the evidence with you that you've heard in the courtroom over the last 6 weeks. And in reviewing this evidence, my goal is to address questions that you may have about what you've heard. And the jury system that we have, frankly, is the greatest criminal justice system in the world, because it's the only system,
I don't
jury
like
system,
already.
that a criminal defendant's fate is put in the hands of his or her peers
I mean,
in this
I
country.
will just say the only thing he's got going for him, in my personal opinion, is that this is a new day and that it was overnight. Let's just say that Creighton finished and then immediately, without any break, or even with a short break, they go right in, like, sorry, no. But the best thing he can hope for is that they forgot how powerful Creighton's closing was overnight. And now they're like, oh, this is great. You know what I mean?
We don't leave the decision of guilt or innocent up to governor, to the attorney general, to the prosecutors, to the presiding judge. You, ladies and gentlemen, make that decision. And as perfect as our jury system is, there's one thing that I wish it provided: an interchange during the course of the trial between us. Y'all sitting there and listening to what we say, and we don't know what questions you have and what you want answered.
He's like, I want to know what you're thinking. $1 million question for every trial, right?
Same token, we may have questions of you that we can't ask. Here's my opportunity to try to answer the questions that I think you have. There may be some things that I go over that you've already decided, and I'm wasting your time. And if I do that, I apologize. I truly do. But I don't
like that at all. Like, that's not confident. That's like saying they've already made up their minds before you've even made your argument. Yikes.
Case is so important. I don't want to leave anything out that one of you may have a question about. I think I can probably speak to for everybody in this courtroom that there's one thing that we on this side have no question about.
Oh boy.
It's that y'all have been ideal jurors.
Okay, well
We've been here 6 weeks, and each of you have come every day on time, and you've been very attentive, and it has not gone unnoticed. And we do appreciate you for your service. We know what a sacrifice it is, being away from your home, your work, your family, your personal obligations.
By the way, we got a straight up G in the house wearing the yellow suit. Y'all let's just appreciate him right there. I think he's a retired sheriff or something like that, if I recall. But check it out. That's an OG right there. That's an OG in the Low Country. For real.
Your work, your family, your personal obligations. Maybe some of you miss vacations. But you've been here in a 3-week trial, and here we are at the end of 6 weeks. And I want to thank you personally. I want to thank you on behalf of Mr. Harpootlian, Mr. Barber, Ms. Fox, and especially on behalf of Alec Murdaugh.
Yeah.
In his opening statement, Mr. Harpootlian explained to you that the law governing your service requires each of you to engage in an unnatural task. In every criminal case, jurors are required to begin the process
There's,
by
by the
presuming
way,
the
there's Mark Tinsley in the gallery there.
defendant innocent. In this case, you were required under your solemn oath as we began.
I will just say, I hate to say this, I can't watch this one. We're gonna watch this on 1.25. It's rare. It's rare. It's a rarity when it's okay. Like that's the thing about Creighton now.
Presume Alec Murdaugh innocent of these charges.
Like 1.25.
And frankly, as he explained, that's not natural. When you hear on the news that a crime has occurred and an arrest has been made, you feel a little bit relieved. Thank God they caught him. And frankly, I would not be surprised if some amongst you,
Right. That's a fair.
when you read in the paper that Alec Murdaugh was charged with the murder of his wife and son, that you thought, oh, good, they got him.
Well, you want to hope they
But
have the right
those
person.
opinions, and each of you, when you filled out your questionnaire, agreed
But public
and
just
affirmed
like
that
it's
you would
all-
leave those at the door of the courthouse,
Yeah.
and that you would decide this case solely on the evidence. And that's what the law requires. And when we begin, the law also requires you to presume him innocent of these charges. Now, I've been doing this a long, long time, and up until the advent of instant replay in sports, it's been very difficult to explain just how to do that to jurors, how jurors can do this, apply this presumption of innocence. And if you're not as interested in sports, I apologize for this analogy, but the analogy is the instant replay. Whether you're a Clemson fan or Georgia fan, that on a Saturday afternoon, there's a play called on the field, and then it's reviewed. And under the rules, the call on the field stands unless there's visual, incontrovertible evidence that the call on the field was wrong.
Is that the analogy he's gonna make? Oh God.
We see that every weekend on sports. Lord. Here, the call on the field is that Alec Murdaugh is innocent of these charges. That's what the law requires. And that unless and until the state proves his guilt to each one of you individually, voting individually, proves his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, then that presumption of innocence stays with him. You're not being tasked here to give your opinion in this trial. You're being tasked to apply the Constitution.
There's
bedrock principles that
a house cat that's gone wild.
Those bedrock principles are, first, you get tried by a jury of your peers. Second, that the jury of your peers begin with presuming you innocent. And third, that you will remain innocent until the government, if they can, proves to you individually in your mind that the person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the judge will give you jury instructions on what that means, beyond a reasonable doubt. But the definition has been defined that reasonable doubt is doubt that would cause a reasonable person to hesitate when making an important decision in their personal affairs, such as to buy a house, get married, any consequential decision. And you will be making when you get this case, probably later this afternoon, you'll be making one of the most consequential decisions that you will have ever made in your life, I suspect. I don't know all of your backgrounds, but it will be a very consequential decision. And if the proof that the state has put before you causes you to hesitate, when you go to fill out that vote as you're deliberating in your jury room,
Nice tie
each
over
of
here.
you will have a vote. And you will have the right to vote guilty or not guilty. And each of you will write it down. And if there's any reasonable cause for you to hesitate to write guilty, then the law requires you to write not
Don't worry, they're not gonna have that problem, Jim.
guilty.
Hate to say it.
This burden of proof that we have, many of you may have had experience with civil cases. And in civil cases, the burden of proof is much lower.
God.
And it's called by preponderance of the evidence. And you may have seen lawyers or judges
I
or watched
have
on
to
TV.
say,
that's-
I don't understand why in any criminal trial they do this. Not every defense attorney does, but some do. I don't understand why you need to walk through the jury through the standard or the burden in civil trials when they are not in a civil trial. It's completely irrelevant. It's like every time I hear this, it feels to me like filibustering. Why? Tell me why. It's just, ugh.
As they
I don't know if it's something that they teach you in law school, but I find that hard to believe because it's like, why? The jury doesn't care. They're not in a civil trial, dude.
give a visual image of Lady Justice, who's blind and who's blindfolded, so she's not biased for one side or the other. And there's scales on Lady Justice. And those scales are the scales of justice. And in a civil case, if one party proves their case by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning ever so slightly tilt those scales in their favor, then they're entitled to the
What
verdict.
he's talking about is in civil trials, right? Preponderance of the evidence is 50% plus a grain of sand, right? It's not relevant here. So why bother explaining it?
There's another heightened level of burden of proof in a civil case called by clear and convincing evidence. And the law requires things like to prove fraud or some intentional acts. You have to prove by clear and convincing evidence. And that's an intermediate level of proof. And so it's not just tilt the scales ever so slightly in the favor of the party that prevails,
85%.
but you have to get sort of 3/4 of the way there. But now proof beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard of proof the law recognizes. And
99.999.
it is, you have to tilt the scales all the way to one side in order for the state to meet their burden.
No.
A little bit about
No. That's not accurate. It's really more like 99.999%. It's not 100%. Anyway.
the verdict. You will have an option of guilty or not guilty. My friend Dick Harpootlian over here he travels a lot. He's been to a lot of countries, and he frequently he recently returned from Scotland, where he attended a jury trial in Scotland. And he tells me it's much like this, except the lawyers wear a wig. I might benefit from something like that. But in Scotland, it runs about the same until it gets time to the verdict in the criminal case.
In case you're saying, could the state object to relevance here? Because he's talking about his friend in Scotland. Yeah, they fucking could. But they're being polite. This is stupid.
And the jury in Scotland, where we derive our laws from, and they are given three options. One option is,
I mean, you're not
guilty.
wrong. I judge.
Second option is not guilty. And the third option is not proven. Not proven. Now here in America, we have combined the verdict of innocent and not proven into one of not guilty. And so when you go to render your verdict, if it's a verdict of not guilty, it's either you concluded that the defendant is innocent of the charges, or that the government has not met their burden of proof, their heavy burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, and one of the reasons that defendants are presumed innocent and the government has such a high burden is because in criminal cases, the defendant really doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the lawful authority to execute search warrants, subpoena documents, to prove his or her innocence. And so a defendant cannot secure a crime scene, cannot lift the crime scene for fingerprints.
He said they couldn't subpoena documents. Did y'all hear that? Who's Brent, by the way? Did you guys hear that? He said they can't subpoena. What?
Ability, doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the lawful authority to execute search warrants, subpoena documents, to prove his or her innocence. And so a defendant cannot secure a crime scene, cannot lift the crime scene for fingerprints, shoe-wear impressions, cannot secure telephones and get electronic data in the course of an investigation. So the defendant is limited on what they can do. In this case, on June 7th, 2021, Alec Murdaugh called 911, and Officer Deputy Green, and then followed by other deputies, rolled up on the scene. And he is standing on his property. His wife and son lie dead in a pool of blood each. He's within yards of him, and he just put a shotgun down. He just put a shotgun down. And what would that look like? 90 out of 100 cases when an officer rolls up, it would look like the person who had the shotgun and two dead bodies may have done it, probably have done it. Certainly someone who should be strongly considered. And all the officers in this case told you that. Deputy Rutland said, yeah, Alec Murdaugh was a suspect, but there are a lot of suspects out there. Everybody was a suspect. Fair enough. Agent Owen says, well, we have a circle, investigative circle, and it starts with immediate family members, particularly if they found the deceased, the victims. So he's in the circle by virtue of calling 911, and that's fair enough. But what doesn't strike us as fair is that the next morning on June the 8th, after the gruesome murders of Maggie and Paul, this is what is issued, a joint press release.
Oh my God.
County and SLED that says At this time, there's no danger to the public. At this time, there's no danger to the public. You have 2 people have been executed within, y'all are out there, I don't know, is it 100 yards, 200 yards from Moselle Road? They've been slaughtered. And at this time, there's no danger to the public. Does that tell you that on June 8th, law enforcement had decided it had to be Murdaugh?
No. It's because this particular place is out in the middle of fucking nowhere. It's loaded with guns to the teeth. And there's no reason anybody would be there. Nothing was stolen. And it was clearly the word they used, targeted, quote unquote, right? As in, it's not just a random killing spree on the loose or whatever, what have you, right? Anyway.
It's a fair question for you to ask yourselves. It's a question that's not been fairly answered in this trial.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
But we know from June 7th to June 8th, Alec is a suspect and he's in the circle. And from that day forward, he is at the mercy. He is at the mercy of the ability of SLED to exclude him from that circle. They have the ability to do the forensic work. They have the ability to interview witnesses, and they have the ability to gather electronic data. And we believe that we've shown conclusively that SLED failed miserably in investigating this case. And had they done a competent job, that Alec would have been excluded from that circle a year ago, 2 years ago, but he would have been excluded. What did you hear from the witness stand? You heard from Chief Barry McCroy. I didn't know Chief McCroy until I got involved in this case, but his reputation is outstanding, and he's a consummate professional. And he explained that when he got there, he was concerned that cars would be pulling up and there were some tire tracks that were not being protected and that they could have evidentiary value. And then you heard from Mark Ball, who had a conversation with Sheriff Hill, who's another fine public servant here. And he also agreed, we've got to stop cars from coming in here to preserve these tire impressions. And it was not done. It was not done. Captain Chapman from the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, he testified about seeing other sets of tire tracks. As you came in off Moselle Road, you probably saw where Deputy Green's vehicle had stopped right at the kennels. But then on the other side, where you saw that Alec was parked and pacing on some of these videos, that's where Captain Chapman had talked about seeing tire tracks, and he tried to track them. SLED was coming on, and then it was like a trail to nowhere. It was a trail to nowhere. Deputy Rutland talked about seeing hair in Maggie's hands, you'll recall. You didn't hear anything about the hair in Maggie's hands from that moment forward. Was it tested? Was it sent off for analysis? There was no evidence of what, if anything, happened to the hair in Maggie's hands. Was it as a result of a struggle with her assailant? Was it her own hair? I mean, we don't know the answer to that. We know they failed to take.
I'm really excited. I had no idea. From now on, that's awesome, dude. Thank you for asking that question to us, because now that I know we can redirect into Runkle whenever we have streams, and if he's still going and he's not wrapping up, we're going to redirect into Runkle. And I wonder if he's going to see that, we came over from here. Anyway, that'll be awesome. So glad to know that. Learn something new every day.
Fingerprints from the feed room, and they should have. They failed to properly take footwear impressions from the feed room or at the apron right outside the feed room. And I think I don't think that's uncontradicted. The Agent Worley, who doing the best she can, did not go there to document footwear impressions. Did not do that. You heard from our expert, Mr. Zerchi, what is required. And I believe Dr. Kinsey also agreed it was not done. I know Mr. Palmbach did. And both, now I'll get to the shot angles in a little bit, but both Dr. Kinsey and Mr. Palmbach have this murderer for Paul standing on the concrete. Whether 1 foot's in, 1 foot's out, both feet are in, but there should have been footwear impressions. But we'll never know because it was not preserved. It was not taken. The thing that has baffled us, has completely baffled us, is why did they never take DNA samples off of Maggie's clothes, her dress? Why did they never take DNA samples off Paul's clothes? They never did. They never did. When we asked their investigators, why didn't you? Well, that's somebody else's job. That's somebody else's job. It was never done. But you know whose clothing they took DNA off of extensively? Alec. And you heard Agent Zapata talk about all the different grids on her shirt where DNA was samples were taken. Was Alec assaulted on June the 7th? No, he wasn't assaulted. Was Alec wrestling with the assailant on June the 7th? There's no evidence of that. So why are they taking DNA evidence off Alec's clothing in June of 2021? And there's only one reason. And it goes back to this right here.
Okay.
There was only one reason. Only one reason.
So in case you're wondering why the cameras are jumping up like they're being jump scared, because they don't know if it's going to be one of those pictures of the crime scene. The court cameras don't. And so out of an abundance of caution, when they see somebody going to grab something dramatically, they're like, oh, camera's up. But it's just that stupid same press release.
Is that they had decided that unless we find somebody else, it's going to be Alec. Unless we find somebody else, it's going to be Alec. And I'll get into more detail about Maggie's phone, and Maggie's phone was not secured properly. Maggie's phone was well. Let me just go right into it. Maggie's phone was found on the side of the road in the morning or early afternoon.
He's just now tangented himself. He was like not planning on going into it, but now he's going to go right into it. So here we go.
Yeah. Whoever killed her threw that phone on the side of the road, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Alec, from the get-go, has said, you get Maggie's phone, you get my phone, or you get my OnStar data, and you will not see my car traveling down the road with Maggie's phone, because it did not happen. It could not happen.
Well,
Detective Owen, have you gotten it yet? No, we've not. We sent the black box from on the Chevy to the FBI. It was a new model. Turns out the data's encrypted, and so we haven't got it yet. Well, what about General Motors? I mean, I'll do what I have to do, whatever I can do. And
come on.
so, well, we're looking into it. We're looking into it. But what we learned during this trial is, sure, SLED sent a subpoena via fax machine to somebody in Detroit, I believe, and whoever got it in Detroit, whether there was a number off, I have no idea what the reason.
Oh, come on, Jim.
But we do know the initial response was, we don't have anything. We don't have any OnStar data that you're looking for. There's no indication that SLED followed up with a phone call. There's no indication SLED followed up with a letter.
This is really dumb. It's already in front of the jury. They already said that they didn't think there was anything shady about this and it was just a fluke. Meanwhile, this is just my personal opinion. I happen to think that maybe Alex had something to do with that. But anyway, regardless, the jury already heard the defense say that there was nothing wrong with that, like that the state didn't do anything to make that happen, right? That's what they said.
No indication SLED did anything other than put it in a file, put the response in a file. And that was it. That was it, ladies and gentlemen, until somebody watching this trial somewhere contacted somebody at General Motors and said, why don't you guys cooperate with the FBI and
Is my
try
eye
on this
not working?
investigation? And they're like, what are you talking about? So Friday, during sometime the last 6 weeks, lo and behold, here comes all the OnStar data that you got to see. And that would be great. That would be great. But for the fact that when they seized Maggie's phone, it had, they put it in airplane mode. They knew how to put it in airplane mode.
That's a great point.
Excuse me, I'm losing my voice.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's really
Pollen, something else. The
this closing for me was really painful. I really wanted it to be a strong closing because Creighton's was so strong. I really wanted this to be a strong closing, especially because Jim's well, you know, he questioned Alex when Alex was on the stand, and it was a disaster. And I felt bad for him because he's Alex's friend, and I really felt bad for him. And I wanted it to be a strong closing. I really wanted it. And it was like, this was painful for me, to be honest. It's still painful.
They put it in airplane mode, but what you'll see, I got a photograph, is the location services were still on, meaning still pinging off GPS satellites. And the phones don't hold that much memory. They hold a lot of data, as we have learned, but they don't hold that much memory. And it writes over itself. And for GPS location services, the ping points that we see from Paul's phone on all that data, that would have been on Maggie's phone for the 7th. But for the fact that it wasn't extracted until sometime in like June 16th. I think that's the date, but if I'm wrong, I apologize, but it's around the middle of June.
Yeah.
And that ping information that we see on Paul's phone, from Maggie's phone, it goes back to like June the 9th. Well, a lot of good that does. We don't have it. We would have had it had they extracted it earlier. And Agent Dove
You're welcome, James.
says we didn't have an upgraded software that would read it. It took us a while to get it. I don't know why it took them a while to get it. There's really no explanation about that. But you heard about Faraday bags. Put it in a Faraday bag. So it's not pinging against satellites, not overriding. They didn't do that. And it's lost. Had they done it, I hope we wouldn't be here. I hope, because I know it would say, because we have enough evidence in the record, and we have to go around our elbow to get to our thumb to get there. But there is sufficient evidence in the record that shows Alec Murdaugh was not driving down the road, Moselle Road, with Maggie's phone in the car and tossed it at whatever time. When he went by at 9:08. I don't know what time they think it's tossed, but that would have gotten him out of the circle. I would hope, but probably not, because they've been so focused on him.
I mean, listen to how he just contradicts himself. It's
and tossed it
rough.
at whatever time. When he went by at 9:08. I don't know what time they think it's tossed, but that would have gotten him out of the circle. I would hope, but probably not, because they've been so focused on him. Now, as I mentioned, Alec asked multiple times. I think the testimony was 5 times. Agent Owen, you know,
The
if you
problem
get this data,
The problem is if he's going to try to argue that, you know, there was an inadequate investigation, which is, you know, it's amazing that they can even make any type of argument to that here. But like, you guys know how restricted it is in other cases. Anyhow, that it's like, okay, due to the inadequate investigation, right? It's like, if they just had this one thing or this other thing, like it would have changed everything. But then at the same time be arguing that it doesn't matter what anybody did because they were sure it was him and no evidence would have changed anything. Sorry, you can't have it both ways.
it will show it wasn't there. And you know, we didn't learn why they didn't get it off Alec's phone until very recently, because you'll remember on June 10th, he gave SLED his phone. Yeah, you can copy it. Please copy it, because it'll show that I wasn't driving. My phone was not with Maggie's phone at any point in time going down the road, and I did what I said I did. Well, they did extract it, but what we've learned, the extraction was a superficial extraction, not because Alec requested it. That's just what they did. Said a logical surface extraction. So they didn't go in and pull out any GPS pinging data like you see on Paul's phone. They didn't get off Alec's. Now, if Alec had not made those requests to Owen, and they are disputing that, it's one thing you can be 100% sure of, is they would have called Detective Owen up here on the witness stand during their rebuttal case to say, no, he lied. He didn't ask that of me. I mean, they got Sheriff Smalls in here to say, I didn't give him permission to put a blue light in his car. They came and challenged whether he had authority from the sheriff or maybe a deputy sheriff to put a blue light in his car. But they didn't contradict anything you said about, I've been asking for this data that would get me out of the circle. And now we know why it took so long to get the stuff from his car. It's because General Motors, the FBI wouldn't go to General Motors on this event data. The FBI was up there and they bought a Suburban, they're riding it around and they're reverse engineering all these systems to try to come up reports. And then they come in here and tell you, well, it's not complete, some is inaccurate, but this is what we got. And during the middle of that, that's when, lo and behold,
How dare you? Dwight Falkowski spent over a year trying to get into that car, developed his own software and all this. Do you think he wanted to work on this day in, day out, only to find out that they had the data all along? Are you kidding me? Oh my God.
On start. Thankfully, we did. Thankfully, we did.
Thankfully, we did. Well, the thing is that it really was a problem because it showed the exact time that he showed up at the kennels and then, you know, the time between that and calling 911. But anyway.
So then we roll into Labor Day weekend of 2021.
Yeah, I know why you said
For Alex, long-time drug problem, his financial issues, misconduct were exposed. And that made him an easy target.
his drug problem was not exposed. He literally exposed it. His financial crimes were exposed. And then he said to everyone that he had a drug problem. It was never exposed. No one ever uncovered anything to support that.
And I hate to say this, but the evidence is crystal clear. From that moment, he started fabricating evidence against Alex. Mr. Griffin, that's an awful charge. Don't all lawyers accuse law enforcement of fabricating evidence? And you know, I can tell you, this guy right here was a federal prosecutor, was a state prosecutor, and some of my best friends are in law enforcement. And I don't make that claim lightly. Here, what you have heard is they came up with a report that says Alex's t-shirt had high velocity blood spatter on it. High velocity blood spatter. What's that? That means you're within feet of a shooting. And they didn't just say any shooting. It said in their report, it says as a result of Paul's murder. High velocity blood spatter on a shirt as a result of Paul's murder. That was number one. Well, let's stick with number one. Why do I say that is fabricated? Well, you heard Agent Zapata said we did hemotrace confirmatory blood tests on that shirt. That means there were two types of tests. There's a presumptive test, which is what they use a product called LCV that makes it turn purple where it might be blood. But it turns purple on other agents as well, including bleach, you heard.
No,
You also heard that the shirt
because
came out of the bag wet and it smelled like detergent. Anyway,
this is honestly objectionable because facts not in evidence. This shit never came in. There was a motion to eliminate, and the state could be objecting. Y'all are so funny in the chat.
they spray it, it turns purple in places. So they think, well, that must be blood.
This is crazy.
Next thing they do at the SLED lab is they do a confirmatory test
Never
to see
came
if it's
in.
blood.
The trial.
0 for 74, not blood, not blood. That didn't stop SLED from going out and pursuing with vengeance this report. They didn't give the no blood test result to the guy in Oklahoma, and
Dude, so this
when
expert
it surfaced,
was a
when it
mess.
surfaced,
And
they had a problem on their hands, and they were pushing it up until this trial. And you heard the testimony from the stand that they went from Mr. Bloody Shirt leading up to this trial to Mr. Clean during this trial. And they asked him, and they raised issues during the trial with Blanca, where were his clothes? No one's asking about the man's clothes that he had on the Snapchat video back in,
Eric came in
at 7 o'clock with his son until November or so, I think is what she said. I mean, the issue of changing clothes, it was late to the dance because
It was late to the dance, guys.
when they went to, as you heard, when they went to the county grand jury to get an indictment that you're going to be deliberating on, they told that grand jury they had an expert report that says high velocity blood spatter. And I asked Agent Owen, I said, when you went to the grand jury and when your guy gave you the report,
This is neither here nor there because you know what? We all know how this goes, right? If there was an issue with the grand jury indictment, take it up with the grand jury indictment, which you know they did. You know they did. This is not for the current jury to try to fix whatever happened then, way back when, right? You know, it's just, there's all these different phases for pretrial litigation, right? And you phase by phase by phase by phase. We are long past the grand jury indictment.
report,
Yikes.
how'd you not know, you chief investigator, how'd you not know that there's this hemotrace test that says it's no blood? Well, I didn't get the email. I'm going to say it in somewhat jest, but, you know, did the dog eat his email? I mean, how's a lead investigator in the case not get the lab report that says there's no blood on the shirt? Now, ultimately, it was produced to us, and we were raising Cain about it and saying, how can you say this on one hand and that on the
I cannot believe is Metters going to object. Metters might be about to object. So Metters, for anyone who doesn't know, Metters is to the right of Jim Griffin. He's got the red tie. He's one of the other prosecutors. He's actually going to be doing the rebuttal closing. So if there's going to be any objections during Jim's closing, he's going to be the one to do it. And I mean, I'm shocked that there's not been objections already, because none of this came in at trial. And it was a motion in limine. So is Metters going to object? It looks like maybe he just started getting animated.
not get the lab report.
I'm
that
shocked
says
he didn't already object.
there's no blood on the shirt. Now, ultimately, it was produced to us, and we were raising Cain about it and saying, how can you say this on one hand and that on the other hand? And here we are with a Mr. Clean theory that he washed off
Fine, no objection.
after brutally murdering Maggie and Paul. He takes a hose and washes himself off and gets in a golf cart, butt naked, I guess, and drives to the house. So that's the blood spatter fabrication.
I don't know why that's so ridiculous. Here's the thing. He's out in the middle of fucking nowhere. Acres, but from the next house. Is it really that? I mean, anyway.
The other is this blue raincoat with
The only thing
TSR.
I would be worried about would be the mosquitoes, because it was summer in the low country, man. Or what did they say? It was the yellow flies out there, I guess. That's what they said.
And you remember that testimony. Shelley Smith, who worked for Ms. Libby and Mr. Randolph, had told SLED after September, after all of his problems had been exposed,
Fine, I guess.
after she had a conversation with a Allendale police officer following an accident investigation, which she was in an accident, that on the morning, she said in here, as she told you, on Wednesday after Mr. Randolph's funeral, and that turns out to be, I think, June 16th, that Alex shows up at the house at Alameda at like 6:30 in the morning, knocking, trying to get in, and he has a blue tarp. And in this blue tarp, she lets him in. He goes upstairs with this blue tarp. He comes back downstairs. He lays this blue tarp out on Ms. Libby's retirement rocking chair in the living room, and then he leaves. And then she leaves to go to her day job. And when she left, the blue tarp was laying out on Ms. Libby's rocking chair. That was her testimony. And so SLED gets that, gets a search warrant, goes to Alameda, and they seize a blue rain jacket. And when they do, they take that blue rain jacket and they show it to just about
Here comes tarp raincoat gate.
every family member. Let me get it right quick. That they can think of, and it's Defendants 87, Doug, if you can pull it up. But they show this blue rain jacket to all as many family members
Like
as
he
they
couldn't
can
get out of the
contact
box or something. So
with.
he
And
just
the rain
cleaned up.
jacket is, and no one recognizes it. No one sees it. No one said Alex ever worn it. No one said Paul's ever worn it. No one said Buster's ever worn it. No one said Maggie's ever worn it. Have not seen this blue rain jacket. Have not seen this blue rain jacket. One more thing about this blue rain jacket. When they did the search at Alameda, John Marvin was there. And John Marvin asked him, did you find anything? And he said, well, we found a blue rain jacket back on the property. And he said, well, my dad drives a buggy around and maybe it fell off the back of his buggy. Clearly, John Marvin was understanding that it was back on the property. And then they asked him to come look at the blue rain jacket, and he was told it was found in the closet.
I find it interesting.
And he said,
John Marvin is a very, I think his DNA is different than Alex's DNA. But it's interesting that of all the siblings and all the family members, again, you had Buster, right? But in other words, Alex has two other siblings, right? And John Marvin's the only one that testified on his behalf. And I have to wonder, it's like John Marvin, you can just see that he feels like he just sees the good in everybody, And like his testimony was so gut-wrenching to watch. And like he truly believes his brother didn't do it. You know what I mean? And I have to wonder, though, if they didn't call Lynn and Randy because that testimony might have been a little bit different. I don't know. I just thought of it because he just referenced John Marvin with this blue tarp raincoat gate.
that didn't sound right. And they never clarified it. Now here's a picture. I'm not even gonna put it up, but I'm gonna, 411 is a picture of this closet. And you can see the blue rain jacket that's just sort of folded up and stuff down here at the bottom right. That's the blue rain jacket. And apparently right before this trial, they showed Shelley Smith this picture and says, does that look like the blue tarp you saw? I said, well, yeah, yeah, sure, it looks like it. He never showed her this. He never showed her this. And she said, this is page 87, it's on the
I'm
screen.
pretty sure he's misstating
Never
testing.
seen that. Never seen this.
Well,
But
that's
GSR
not.
testing on this and says, whoo, that's a hot, it's hot. A lot of GSR.
I mean, I love how he's just shuffling through pictures and not even showing them what he's referring to when he makes these statements. The jury has like literally no idea. He's just like, watch. He's just like shuffling through. Watch.
But they did GSR testing on this and says, whoo, that's a hot, it's hot.
Where are you even?
A lot of GSR. Manufactured evidence, ladies and gentlemen. And then there's this issue of misrepresenting what are the type ammunition found in the shotguns at the residence at Moselle. Paul was murdered with first shot was a buckshot. Went through his chest. He was turned this way, went in here, and then out under his arm, and that was buckshot. The second shot was into the head, either depending what expert, what pathologist, it's either this way or this way, but into the head, and that was still
Wild.
duck shot.
Bird shot. You know what's wild? There was somebody in this world chat who I didn't know this until they said something about it. But like apparently, here's what I learned. Apparently, there's like I don't know if it's just if you ask Google, maybe if you Google, but it's like at the very least it's Google, if not like mainstream media, says that the buckshot is what killed Paul. Like it literally says the first shot was birdshot and the second shot was buckshot. And it blows my mind because if I had a penny for every time in this trial they talk about how Paul died in the order of those shots, I would be wealthy. And it's wild because it's like clearly whatever those sources are didn't watch a single day of this trial, or they would know it was buckshot and then birdshot, and birdshot is what killed him. It just blows my mind. So I just wanted to point that out for any of you guys who come across anything. And if you see something that says it was birdshot and then buckshot, it's misinformation. Other way around.
I learned that you can't shoot ducks with anything but steel pellets because they don't want lead in the water. So you got to have steel pellets.
Who cares?
And then Owen testified, admitted begrudgingly that he had testified to the grand jury that there were 4 weapons found up on the property in the gun room, 12 gauges that were loaded, or I'm not saying 12 gauges, I'm sorry, 4 shotguns that were loaded with buckshot and birdshot. There's 4 other ones. So that matches.
It was Paul's
Well,
habit.
guess what? Totally not true. That was totally not true. And he admitted on the stand it was not true. He admitted telling Alec during the interview, and he said, well, I can do trickery. And we're going to see that shortly.
I think it ended up being
But
3 weapons, but still, it was Paul's
And I
habit.
said, are you trying to trick the grand jury? No, I didn't say that. Well, we walked through it, and he did say it. And he didn't remember it, and you'll remember the testimony. And I said, well, people make mistakes, don't you? Yeah, that was a mistake. And it's okay to make mistakes, right? Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
And you can make mistakes about time. Well,
I'll tell you what, after he didn't get any objections, after the state didn't object to the whole thing about the t-shirt, which again, inadmissible, didn't come into trial. I mean, here's what that basically, I think, says to Jim, which is you can basically say anything and they're not going to object. I mean, we'll see. I don't remember if they end up objecting or not, but I mean, in general, in this trial, there were very few objections. It's just not their style, right? They're just like, let's just duke it out and let everybody make up the rules, essentially, which is part of the reason why I love it, because it's just like a chaotic shit show where anything goes. So I'm just reiterating that a lot of what he's saying is misstating testimony, facts on evidence. It's objectionable for numerous reasons, but he's just going on. So
that's the most common thing people make mistakes about.
there you go.
It's not all right for Alec Murdaugh, who's in the center of the circle, who's not all right for him to make mistakes about time. It is not all right, according to the same investigator who says it's okay, it happens all the time. But here we go, and then Eureka. They finally get into Paul's phone in April of 2022, and they see Alec. Well, they don't see Alec. They see Cash the dog, and they see Paul's feet walking around, and they hear voices in the background. One of them sounds like Alec. And
It's lying because it's not the mistake that he made a mistake about time that was the problem. It was how would he have known the time frame to lie about unless he was there and knew what time he needed to lie about. Anyway.
And off they go.
Oh
They
boy.
go off and get an indictment from the Collin County Grand Jury relying upon high velocity blood spatter, relying upon 4 guns having the same load, and relying upon a rain jacket that's got GSR on it, and Alex lying about being down at the kennels. Now we know after we've been here 6 weeks, of those 4 things.
Oh my God, I forgot about this part. Hold on, I'm gonna back it up. I forgot about this. His phone goes off.
A rain jacket that's got GSR on it, and Alex lying about being down at the kennels. Now we know after we've been here 6 weeks, of those 4 things.
Incredible. His phone. I die of embarrassment on his behalf watching that. I am dying of embarrassment. If I were him, I would have to run out of that courtroom.
What we know is 3 out of those 4 things that was presented to the Collin County Grand Jury that you're going to be deliberating on for the indictments that return aren't true. No blood spatter, no GSR rain jacket that's ever been connected to Alex whatsoever, and there's no loaded gun. So we're left with the lie. We are left with the lie. Now, Alex lied about being down at the kennels in Almeda. And why did he lie? And that is certainly a fair question. And that's and frankly, I probably wouldn't be sitting over there right now. He had not lied, but he did lie, and he told you he lied, and he told you why he lied. He said he lied because, I'll tell you, he lied because that's what addicts do. Addicts lie. He lied because he had a closet full of skeletons that he didn't want any more scrutiny on him, which is the most ironic thing in the world because depending on which day of the week, their theory is that he slaughtered his wife and son to distract from a impending financial investigation. But he puts himself in the middle of a murder investigation, and he puts himself in the spotlight of a media firestorm. That's their motive. So we'll get to that. But he lied. He lied because of his drug paranoia kicked in, and he was clearly in the throes of addiction. He lied for all those reasons. But what he didn't lie for is because he was covering up the fact that he killed Maggie and Paul. That is not the reason he did it. Doug, will you play the dog kennel video, please? I'm going to play the dog kennel video. So just please listen to the voice.
There's a chicken.
4 minutes later, the state would have you to believe that Alec Murdaugh up and blew his son's brains out of his head and murders his wife after having that conversation about Bubba having a chicken or a guinea. 4 minutes later, their case wants you to believe that this is a family down at the dog kennels doing what families do. They're checking on a dog, tail, Bubba's out running around, and they're saying, Bubba, got a chicken.
There's a chicken.
Now, how does Alec not want law enforcement to hear that? I mean, there's nothing on that tape. There's nothing on that tape that indicates there's any strife, any conflict, any anger.
That's not the point.
Any
You
planning,
know it.
anybody being afraid, anybody running, anybody scurrying.
Thing is that
Nothing.
just points honestly to the cold-bloodedness
Maggie,
and his ability to
Paul,
manipulate and lie.
And Alec down at the kennel. That's it. And their timeline is based on the fact that this automated thing kind of messed me up, but the point I was going to open this up and say, under their theory, if your phone's not moving, for some period of time, you're dead right then. You could be run over in the traffic 2 hours later, but if you're not answering a text 2 minutes after you receive it, you're dead at that point. And that's their case. That is their case on time of death. Is phone stop moving, you're dead. You've heard testimony from a lot of witnesses. I would say practically every witness who took the stand, who actually knew Alec and Maggie and Paul and Buster, testified under oath how much Alec adored Maggie. She was his all. Some people describe Paul as
the state so astutely, clear as day, showed that no one really ever knew him.
Alec's best friend. His relationship with him was
No
awesome.
one. No one knows him.
And
no one.
and that was unanimous. Unanimous. I want to just play briefly a clip from Blanca testimony about Alec's relationship with Maggie.
You've also, I think, in multiple
Now
interviews
this is
with,
interesting because they did not get to prove.
Sweat and other folks described, I think the words were, Maggie.
Yep. So they never asked to play these clips. They want to play testimony, and so now I think they have to have a chat. Yep.
He adored her.
Okay.
All.
But then they say it's okay.
Yes, sir.
What does that mean? Maggie was his all.
He adored her. He loved her. He adored her.
Worshipped her. I mean, just treated her as somebody he adored, correct?
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Now, this was her testimony from the witness stand. Then in every trial, there's just, you hope you find, some very authentic witness, part of the fabric of America that comes in this courtroom. And we had it in this case, and it's Dale Davis. And I want you to remember what Dale testified
knew he was
about
gonna
Alec's
say that.
relationship with his family. We played Dale Davis's.
Me?
My favorite witness.
Lovey-dovey about Alec and Maggie, what does that mean? It means they loved each other. What, in your presence, you described them as being lovey-dovey, didn't you? Yes. And tell the jury what you meant by that. Oh, every time I always see them, I've never seen that man even raise his voice at his wife or kids. Or his wife. I've never seen him even, none of them argue. But he always, anything she wanted or the boys wanted, he would try to get it. And what was your observation about the relationship with Paul? They like to hunt and fish together. I mean, they drink beer together. Okay.
That was Dale Davis. Which brings us to the question, why? Why would Alec Murdaugh on June 7th execute his son Paul and his wife Maggie, who he adored and loved? Why? The state's theory is that there was a storm a-coming, clouds are arising, and that his financial house of cards is about to collapse and he's about to be exposed. And because of that, he does what every rational person would do: go kill your wife and son. That is their theory of motive. That is their theory of motive. And it worked too, by the way, because he killed his wife and son. Guess what? Jeannie Seconder quit asking questions for a few weeks. Oh, in the boating case, that won't be worth anything now that his wife and son have been murdered because he's sympathetic. Have you heard such? One thing Mr. Waters and I agree on is the best thing about jurors is you bring your common sense in here and you use your common sense. And that's what it's all about. That's what your collective wisdom. And just collectively think, individually think, what kind of sense does that make? Alex, his financial house is a wreck. He's stealing money from clients. He's got to produce a financial statement, maybe, in a hearing coming up. And his dad goes back in the hospital that day. And he hopefully dies a few days later. Okay, so I get a call. Jeannie comes in. My dad's going to the hospital. Paul's coming home. That'd be a good time to kill Paul, wouldn't it? That is their theory of the case. And if you don't accept that beyond a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen, I submit the verdict has to be not guilty.
Nope, that's not how the law works.
There's no reason for him to do it.
They don't have to
No
prove
reason whatsoever.
motive, Jim. They don't have to prove motive.
Now, you've heard a lot of testimony about these financial crimes, misdeeds, and he told you he did it. He told you he did it to support a very expensive drug habit, and none of that's an excuse, but he is an addict, and
Could have
addiction is
objected
real.
there to misstates the
And
law.
addicts lie, addicts cheat, addicts steal to keep getting their drug. The evidence was permitted in this case for you to hear solely to consider, did he murder his wife and son because he had this storm coming, that he was going to be exposed? Is that why he murdered? That's what they say. That's why he murdered. And that's why you're allowed to consider it. Now, Judge Newman in his jury instructions will tell you that's all you can consider it for. You can't consider it by saying, man, I never knew he could do that. So if he could do that, he must be able to do the most heinous crimes in the world, kill his wife and son, execute him style. That's a no use of that evidence. The only permissible use of the evidence is that sufficient provocation, motive for him to kill his wife and son? Was it sufficient motive, not provocation? And the evidence in the case is that there was no impending financial doom on June 7th. June 7th was a day which frankly was no different than any other day in the frenetic lifestyle of Alec Murdaugh. He had so many balls in the air. And he even, I forgot his paralegal's name, I apologize to her. I think Christy. She said he would come in like a Tasmanian devil. I mean, he was frenetic. And they were on to this $792,000 fee in the Ferris case. And they were asking questions with Chris Wilson's office. But the reason they weren't concerned that he was stealing money. They were concerned that he was sheltering money, trying to hide it from being disclosed in the voting litigation, which he was a
And then
defendant.
they realized he was
They didn't want
stealing
any part of that. And that situation with the voting, with the Ferris fee, as Ms. Seconder, Jimmy Seconder said, that was a one-off. That was completely on its own, different type conduct than all the other stuff that you heard about. That was a one-off. And what happened on June 7th? She says, I'm in his office, and he gets a phone call that his dad's put back in the hospital. And she thinks that he told her it was terminal. He may have, I don't know, but his dad is put back in the hospital. He wasn't terminal that day, but the next day he got the terminal diagnosis. In any event, she takes off her CFO hat and puts on her mama bear hat and hugs him and a friend hat. And
That's literally the state's theory. Part
the
of
theory
it.
is he slaughters Maggie and Paul to buy time from her investigation. That is it. That is their theory. That is their theory. And it's totally fabricated. They've got no evidence of that.
He's listening
There's
to
no
us.
evidence that Maggie was on to his financial misdeeds. There's no evidence that she was about to blow the whistle on him. There's no evidence that he had a $20 million life insurance policy on her, and that if he murdered her, that he could get out of financial bond.
There was no life
None of
insurance.
that. None of that. And I asked Ms. Seconder, how long of a delay did that buy out? What, month maybe?
Haas long.
A month? A month? That's their theory. That's what their case is built upon. And then this motions hearing is
2 words for you,
there's a
Jim.
motions hearing
Hamster
scheduled for
wheel.
Thursday. It had previously been scheduled 2 other times. And it was continued at the last minute on the other occasions because 2 of the lawyers had cancer and were receiving treatments. But it wasn't sure it was going to be continued previously. Did he go murder anybody, to get out from under those prior hearings? No, this had nothing to do with it. And, so they brought the plaintiff's lawyer in, and he's an excellent lawyer, and he's, like any plaintiff's lawyer. I'm going to clean his clock. I'm going to take everything he's got. That's what they all say. So then we had to bring the defense lawyer in to say, that was a negligent parenting case, and it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Folks, that's what we are in a murder case, and that's what we're having to deal with because that is their theory of motive. But even if the financial day of reckoning was impending, if it was right there, Alec would not have killed the people he loved the most in the world. There's no evidence that he would do that. We do have evidence of what he would do and did do. And if you'll pull up Defense Exhibit 125, which is in evidence. On September 2nd, 3rd, 4th, I forget the date. This is Labor Day weekend. He gets his drug dealer, Curtis Eddie Smith, to shoot him in the head
September 4th. I know the
So he
date.
couldn't go
And
on.
why don't you?
because it was all going to come crashing down.
September
He had a
4th.
big life insurance
Jesus
policy.
Christ.
So when Alex
He didn't have any.
is at
Okay.
financial collapse, he doesn't go kill somebody else. He tries to end it himself. This is a natural response. You don't want anybody to do it. But this, people kill themselves
Oh my God.
from being exposed. Don't kill their wife they adore.
If they've already
Son,
killed their
apple of his
family,
eye.
then they're the only
Some
ones
people say.
left. Anyway,
That's not,
just
that's not,
flawed argument.
that is, I don't have the adjective for that. That is so
Not to
outlandish.
mention, I still think you contemplated
Don't
it.
have a word for it.
Pause on the railroad tracks.
Totally illogical, irrational, and insane. Those are words I wrote down.
Oh, this part's great. This is great. Listen, guys. Oh, that's right. This is a good part.
For that. That is so
Hold
outlandish.
on, hold on, hold on. Okay, let me back it up.
That is, I don't have the adjective for that. That is so
I don't have the adjective for that.
outlandish. I don't have a word for it.
I don't have a word for it. And then he realizes he wrote some words down.
Totally illogical, irrational, and insane. Those are words I wrote down.
Totally logical, irrational, and insane. Also, how I would describe this closing argument.
For someone to kill their loved ones when their criminal conduct is being exposed. So, you can pay that now. Yeah, thank you, Doug.
The phone going off was just.
So yesterday we heard a lot from Mr. Waters. And I've been in Mr. Waters' position. As I explained, I was a federal prosecutor for a number of years. I've been a state prosecutor, part-time mostly. And I've done his job. It's a very rewarding job. And I hold him and I hold his office.
Don't you dare now
in very
go
high
talking
esteem.
shit about him.
But there just sometimes folks just get caught up in a case, they get a desire to win. They get so intoxicated by the attention that's brought on by the case that they start sort of a win at all cost approach.
It matters.
And I'm going to go through some things that Mr. Waters stated to you that just aren't facts and
Oh, boy.
are supported by the facts and the evidence that you heard. And
Ironic.
before I do that, I want to give you a cautionary statement. We lawyers aren't witnesses. I didn't take an oath to stand up here and talk to you. I have ethical obligations about what I can say and limitations under the rules, but I'm not a witness. I'm here to talk to you about the evidence. And the same applies to Mr. Waters. You decide what the evidence is. You decide. And
Further, we're going to take a short break for about 10 minutes. Please not discuss the case.
You guys know how rare it is for them to stop like that, right? I have to wonder if the jury was nodding off. I think it's entirely possible. How much longer does he go? Let's see. I remember thinking it was really long. Oh my God, it's so long. Hoss long. Oh my God, it's so long. It's really fucking long. Dude, like couple more hours to go on him? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I think we're going to save this for next time. Because Frodo says he wants to go out and I've got some other things I got to do and it'll be more manageable in another dose. So we will have another installment of the closing arguments, I believe. That was a good cue from Judge Newman. Jesus Christ. What's interesting, so where does he stop it? He's talking shit about Creighton, basically.
and limitations under the rules, but I'm not a witness. I'm here to talk to you about the evidence. And the same applies to Mr. Waters. You decide what the evidence is. You decide. And
Further, we're going to take a short break.
The thing about his closing argument is it's like, my opinion, very, this was even what I thought at the time. Extremely disjointed, disorganized, lacks focus, contradicts himself, interrupts himself. And that's even if you don't add in the things like misstating the testimony, facts not in evidence, misstating the law. I wonder if the state just feels sorry for him and that's why they're not objecting. I mean, there's so much of this, man. And then you have the cell phone going off. And if I recall, I think there's even more blunders yet to come, although that's a tough one to top. So Flash is going to sleep now. Perfect timing. cheese and rice. Don't know what that's in reference to, but guys, that'll be it for this one. And we will carry on with part 3 next time. And hopefully I'll see you guys all tomorrow for Karen Reed. If there's any other new docs for like Coburger, then we will, of course, get to those as well. But that'll be it for now. But I love y'all. Y'all are the best. Thanks for being here as always and hanging out. And I will see you guys on the flippity flop. But for now, scroll out.